Welcome, Lo. I'm Mo. This is At the Movies with Lo and Mo, a name that we picked at the very last minute.
Literally the last minute. We just did it right now.
Just right now. And I don't think Roger and Ebert are around to DCMA us for it, so I think we're going to be okay.
And if they are, you're going to be hearing this with zero audio and just our pretty faces. So congratulations either way. I think it's good.
I think it's a win-win. This is the first episode of a show that we're doing. Lo and I have been watching movies. So I guess for background context, we both picked a director, maybe our favorite director. I'm not sure if this is your favorite director or just somebody that you respected them, but we decided to watch through two different directors' filmographies, and we're alternating movies. So we are doing Martin Scorsese and David Cronenberg, and we have watched a few films, but this is the first episode that we are recording. And today we are going to talk about Scanners, the 1981 film from David Cronenberg.
Super excited to talk to you about this today, and definitely pick Scorsese because he is one of my favorite directors. And also, while we're doing the whole Lomo thing, definitely a lot that I'm going to draw inspiration from him. So definitely got to learn a lot from him. So
yeah, this whole thing started out as like an exercise to kind of pick out, I guess, watching movies from a technical aspect and from a filmmaker's standpoint and trying to notice things that we maybe didn't notice before we started filming things,
Yeah.
So I think so far every conversation we've had about these movies, even if we didn't love the film, I think there were things that we've picked out from a filmmaker standpoint that we are going to carry moving forward.
No, at 100%. I think this is a really good first episode. Scanners is the perfect one to start. I think it's kind of, the reason why we didn't want to really record our conversation with the other ones, they were kind of like behind the times. This one's kind of catching a little bit back up, and there's a lot more to talk about and interesting for our viewers to watch as well.
Yeah, I think there's, this is certainly, I think, so I picked Cronenberg. I am more of a horror guy, I guess, as our viewers will come to learn. But I picked Cronenberg because I think that he has a lot of flexibility in terms of genre. And I think that this is actually... So we did watch through his filmography. We watched Fast Company, which was a very random like action adventure film that was right like sandwiched in between his horror movies. But I think this is maybe one of the first movies where he is kind of branching out and combining more than one genre. So like Brood was a horror film and maybe my favorite Cronenberg film, but this is the first time that we're seeing like elements of sci-fi and action and drama pulled together.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is, I would say, this movie impacted me the first time I watched it. And I've picked up some things that I didn't notice the first time I watched it. So I want to pass it over to you. I'm curious to hear what your first impressions were.
First impressions were, I was highly impressed. I mean, I'm coming into this only seeing, that head explosion scene over and over again, growing up and just seeing that. That was that's the only thing I knew about this movie going into it. So I was excited to see it. I think that it was well written. I think it was well directed. He really stepped into his element here from the other movies that we watched. I feel like he's definitely really pushing it now. He's really coming into his role as a director and a writer, which I find fascinating to see now. I like how the story picked up. We were fully immersed in this world that Cronenberg created right off of the start. There wasn't waiting around. There wasn't any questions, and we knew right away exactly what and how this world operated, which I think is key when you're writing and directing movies.
Yeah, I love that opening scene. You are just immediately brought into this, what is essentially like a chase, with the lead character running through a food court in a mall, and you instantly get this sense of urgency, like watching the character. And then when you sit down and you see him observe these women eating across from him, and it's clear that he's able to like hear what they're thinking. It's not clear whether they're maybe saying it out loud or whether it's something they're thinking, but it's like you can tell that it is causing him like physical discomfort.
Yeah, pain. You
And
can
so
see that right off the bat. You can see how much pain he's in without even really
you
understanding what we're
immediately,
going into yet.
right, you immediately kind of get this idea for like what scanning is, but it isn't. I mean, it is more than just like psychic powers. As you find out later throughout the movie, there is this whole kind of um, there's a weird journey the main character goes on where he kind of learns how to use his scanning powers and like hone them in. There's people that obviously are able to use them to like punish other people.
Yeah, I think it was key, at least from it was my first time watching it. So as I said earlier, we jumped immediately into this world, but I didn't know at first, and I don't know if it's just because like what I was watching, I was a little bit confused at first when there was so much noise and they were all like talking. At first, I was like, "Wow, are they really saying this out loud? Like, are those two having a conversation together?" And then then you suddenly realize like, "Oh no, this guy is just in their head."
Yeah, and that's something you and I talked about is how effective the sound design is in this movie. Something that I probably wouldn't have thought of as like as a viewer, you notice things like you're not dumb when you're watching movies, but I don't think I ever would have said like, "Wow, look at the sound design in this movie," until we really started thinking critically about these movies. And there's a scene where when he is when the lead character is captured, um, there is a scene where he is surrounded by people who are all having these thoughts, and their voices are like distorted and deepened, and it's so unsettling. Like it's so effectively unsettling throughout the movie.
If you were just watching this movie and not like watching it how we'd watch movies now with like a notepad, a pen and paper, like analyzing everything, you might miss how key that sound is. And you really understand how key it is, you know, when he's captured, he's in that bed, he's tied down.
Yep.
Everybody enters out of that room, and you just hear all of these voices just distorted, and how much pain that's causing him. You start to almost feel empathy for Cameron there when
Yep.
he's laying in that bed. He's struggling. He's trying to fight and pull, and they're just sitting there. They're not even talking. All these people that they bring in, and you just hear this like horror sound of just that distorted, low pitched voice, and that was just part where I was like, oh, here we are, we're in it now.
Imagine seeing this. So we have the added context of knowing about that scene before seeing the movie. But I'm picturing and I'm thinking about the anecdote that you told me that you should expand on. But imagine seeing this movie without knowing what's coming in that scene. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like
I knew it was coming. I didn't know it was coming like right there, but I was like, I already knew that it was happening. The funniest thing is to me is when they started previewing this movie out to audiences and kind of getting their feedback before they went to the final cut. This scene was actually the opening scene. So just as before, Cronenberg wanted us to be directly transplanted into this universe and understand the boundaries that he set, he wanted us to even be fully understanding of this universe by us seeing that first. But when they were getting everybody leaving, they actually found out that most people stopped watching the movie after this part, and they couldn't even focus because it was so jarring to them, and it was just too much for them to handle when they first saw this movie. So they made a creative decision to move it to where it currently is. But the part that I think is funny as well is that I feel like you would have to do the opposite if you were to make this movie today, which is the kind of the weird contrast between 1981 and
yeah.
2020, 2021 now. How if you were to make a movie like this, audiences want to see that right up front. They want to see that action. They want to see that, and they're like, "All right, we're here." You know, they kind of live
Right.
for it now. But back then, they were like, "No, thanks."
I mean, obviously, I haven't seen a cut where it is at the beginning, but I would assume that if you were to see a trailer for the movie and then see the movie, and that's the first thing in the actual film, you would wonder if this is like a horror movie, you know, which I guess maybe you're thinking that anyways because it's David Cronenberg's name is attached. But to me, this is not a horror film, even though it does have some
Yeah.
horrifying elements to it, you know.
Now, the one thing that wasn't said
I
when I
think
was reading this is that when they said that this scene was at the beginning, I don't know if that whole entire chase scene and the fight scenes and the car crashes and seeing Revik really use his powers. I don't know if that was still at the beginning because that's a lot to handle all at the beginning. Like you're getting a lot of
true,
information. At least now with the current
true.
cut, you're kind of warmed up to the scanners and what they're capable of, and you kind of see like somebody not understand other powers. I don't know if I could have went and saw somebody that was at the top of the chain and then go at the bottom so quick.
Right, right. Yeah, I think the violence in this movie is used to highlight the dramatic aspects of the film. Um, yeah, like the head exploding is kind of a shock move for sure. I can't really say that that's like a dramatic decision, especially it's just funny to think about them like exploding a watermelon with a shotgun because that sounds fun. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? But overall, like later in the movie, I think the violence is used as I think it is primarily used like not to shock, but to further the story and to show you what scanning has the potential to be. With the scene where he is kind of honing in his Cameron is kind of honing in his scanning abilities, and this also tips its hat at kind of Consec being maybe not the most moral entity or corporation, but when he has him practice on this old man, and even though the old man, he says the old man is like volunteered to be there, seeing how easy it is for Cameron to suddenly use too much of his abilities and to spike this old man's heartbeat uh, to be so much faster than he was trying to, really like drives home how sensitive these powers are, you know.
We see him kind of almost mature, like right before our eyes. You know, when we first see him, he's this social outcast that can't even function. It just seems like he was dropped in out of nowhere without any kind of clue as to where he's going or how to even navigate through society. And then after his run in with Dr. Ruth and going through that and everything else, I just feel like he kind of just was like he went from not being able to talk to being like able to hold a conversation and not manipulate people like in a second.
Yeah. And even further than that, there's this is gonna sound crazy. I don't know if it's because it's an 80s sci-fi thing or what, but there's something that made me think about Star Wars during this movie, and I can't explain why, but part of it may be this idea of like an unexpected hero, somebody who never asked for this, being thrust into suddenly. It's like you are, Consec is telling him you're going to be our scanner, like you are the one that's going to get us out of this. You're the one that's going to, defeat Ravik and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's weird that you call it that you felt like it was a Star Wars movie because I made multiple jokes how this felt like it was like a bottom of the barrel Marvel movie. I know that we kind of have a difference of opinion on this one, or at least I sense that, which is good. But they completely lost me when Dr. Ruth talking about getting into the RIPE program on the computer. When Dr. Ruth looks at Vale and he goes, a computer network is the same as a human's nervous system. If you can scan a human, you can scan a computer. And I was like, no, absolutely not.
I think that, yeah, I mean, that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you. But what's
really
interesting about
me.
it,
I don't know why. So
what's interesting about it for me is I think it says more about it. It almost feels more reflective of Cronenberg himself and his career, like his filmography, than it does this particular movie, because he does so much with like biotechnology and there's more later, and I'm excited as we go through his filmography, like you'll see how these themes grow, but like there's so much of like human bodies fusing with technology in ways that are scary and in ways that are in ways that you think are going to be beneficial, or the characters anticipate being beneficial, and then it ends up being a horror story, of course. So just having this comparison of the human body is just like a computer feels like almost just like his point of view or his philosophy,
Yeah, the one credit I will give is, it's almost needed for them because they're really pushing the whole being a scanner is just not being a psychic. It's more than that. So you kind of come in a little bit there to like a realm of understanding.
To your point about, scanning being more than just psychic abilities, I really think they do a good job of demonstrating, like, throughout the film, like the pacing of how they show those up until the finale. Is great, because you go from thinking it's kind of a psychic power, you see this ultimate scanner guy blow some guy's head up, which you're like, oh shit, and then, but as you see Cameron learn his abilities, there's like uses for it that seem like they are not malevolent. And then you find out that Cameron is being hunted down by these other scanners, and there are people being set on fire, and like people are being moved and thrown across rooms. It's
just that fire that comes out of the wall, and just when you kind of see, like, at the second attempt on other lives, you see them kind of get caught on fire there, and that whole apartment's burning down. And that's after he meets Pierce, and after that shooting scene, when we see, I know we talked about it earlier, but when we first get to see everybody's faces when they're getting scanned, when they're in that art studio and Pierce is running around hiding and getting shot. That actually is probably where that kind of looked like a Star Wars scene with how many shots they missed. But no, when you see Vale sitting in that statue, or that head kind of just going through, like, cerebrally, just attacking everybody and throwing them across the room, that was nice. I really like that scene.
Yeah, that's a strong moment, I think, for anybody's first time watching the movie. I can't help but think, I don't know if we're going to cut this out, how many times I say I don't want this to be political, but I can't help but think
They're all
about...
staying in, every one of them.
That's not where I was going with it, but that's funny. When they're in that apartment, it is this idea that, like, this corporate entity is sending out this, like, death squad to track down these people that are getting together in private places, like these kind of hidden operations, and these are people who specifically don't want to cause harm. They're not there to cause trouble. So it does feel like, in a vague way, it doesn't feel political in the sense of like modern politics, but in a vague way, it feels very political in the sense of the way that the world handles people that try to preach peace and try to not cause issues and not be dangerous.
Yeah, the more peace that they were trying to preach, the more peace that they were trying to get using their abilities, the more force we see by Revok. It's about time that we just talk about how the fact that Revok and Vale are brothers.
I'm gonna suck your brains.
Yeah, the whole "I've been looking for you forever." We get some more context there. That Revok's actually been searching for Vale for a very long time, to be second in his scanner army, if you will. Not only is Consec trying to do their own thing, but Revok's trying to build a empire with scanners, because he feels that they're the alpha species. It's scanners and everybody else.
Right.
So we find out that Revok and Vale are brothers. We find out that Revok's building this huge army. He's been giving doctors the drug to give the pregnant woman. Every time that this drug is administered, those babies, those fetuses, are actually becoming scanners. We see this when they're at the doctor's office, and Kate comes in all scared, and she's like, "Oh, I've been scanned." And Vale's like, "By the lady?" And she's like, "By the baby."
Yeah. That part blew my mind when I first watched this movie. I was like, scanner babies? What?
Imagine imagine that
It-
movie where it's just scanner babies, where you're like, oh, this is cute, and then all just babies just exploding everybody's heads
it's
because they
baby
don't understand
geniuses, but it's baby geniuses, but it's baby scanners, um, or boss baby, but it's scanner baby. I
Yeah,
don't
check
know.
out the Lomo Media scanner babies.
Finding out that they're brothers is that it kind of reminded me of you and me, and the way that our mom, uh, the way that we were separated, and you were looking for me for a really long
I was
time.
searching for years and finally found you laying on
It
a
was
couch.
so weird. It was so weird because my workplace was trying to get me to find you and stop you from creating Lomo.
Yeah.
But then you explained everything to me.
Yeah,
and
you
here we
fully
are.
understood where you needed to be. You stopped, being a spy and trying to end Lomo Media, as the enterprise giant it is, and I'm
Right.
glad that we could
And
finally come together and work.
here's the major spoiler, folks. Jimmy and I have, or I should say, Lo and I. I doxed you. Lo and I, Lo and I are. We did not fuse together as one person. The way that at the end of Scanners, the Veil, and after their dialogue and their Cameron's refusal to work with Daryl Revik and their showdown, it is revealed he is the only body remaining in the room, and we find out that Cameron's consciousness has been transferred into Daryl's body, and we see Cameron's eyes in place of Daryl's eyes, and we hear Cameron's voice say, "It's over, we won," which was to me like I thought it was an awesome ending. I was thinking it would have been maybe a little more interesting if we were left wondering if it was really Cameron or not. Like if they're, but I
Yeah,
like,
no,
I
100%.
like
I feel like, yeah, I mean, if it would have kind of ended there where you were kind of guessing as if that was, Cameron there, but I mean, we end, knowing, so we get the satisfaction that the good guys won. There's nothing to worry about
and you
anymore.
don't, you know what? I almost take it back because I feel like a 2020 version of this movie would have ended the way that I said. And it's almost refreshing to see a movie like it doesn't happen often that it ends explicitly with the good guys winning.
Just as I said earlier, if this movie was made today, it would have been all gas in the beginning. We would have saw the head exploding. We would have saw Revik's havoc. There would have been way more car crashes. He would have been scanning people in public. He would have almost been like
there would have
hulking
been
out there.
Yeah,
there would have been more than
Avengers,
one. Yeah, there would have been more than one
Avengers
head
style like buildings crashing like
down.
shit like that.
He's like scanning skyscrapers. They're like crashing down, and then at the end, it would have been them probably both exploding, and then you just see like a body in a corner, and it just looks at the camera, and then it's like Scanners 2020. Thank you. Roll credits.
Right.
That would have been it.
Right. What I was thinking about earlier was when I first saw this film, it really impressed me, and I still love it. I would say that I think the pacing is a little bit slower than I remember it being. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think there's a little more. There was a little more focus on like the dialogue and the dramatic intent than I remembered. I remembered it as being like very fast paced and like action based. But that final scene in the film, the standoff between Cameron and Daryl, is just like, to me, it's crazy that it works so well because throughout the movie, these actors, when they're doing their scanning thing, they're making these silly faces that like from any other director, it could just be like the dumbest thing that you have these people that are just like making weird faces and like gurgling noises. But somehow Cronenberg is able to make it like not only effective but horrifying in that last scene. I really forgot about how grotesque it gets. There's a lot of blood. There's like skin like bubbling up and stuff, which is kind of his forte. But I really think that scene is unforgettable and really tense and effective.
Yeah, that scene. obviously is probably one of the best scenes throughout that whole entire movie.
What would your Scorsese ranking be of those first four films?
Mean Streets, number one. Taxi Driver, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and then Raging Bull. It'll be interesting, and I'm going to say it on camera now. Raging Bull will be at the bottom the whole entire way through this thing. It'll never. It's in fourth now, but it'll be 10th, 12th. It's definitely going to climb all the way down.
I'm curious to see if that prediction comes true. It would also be at the bottom of my ranking.
How
and
about
I
you
would
for
say
your
that
Scorsese? Where are you at currently? 4 or 5 movies deep now into this. Where do you sit?
yeah, I have enjoyed all of them to an extent. You and I are on the same page in terms of Raging Bull. We technically admired the film, but there were parts of the film that we did not click with or enjoy.
Yeah.
So Raging Bull would be at the bottom. I would say my favorite, surprisingly, and I did not expect this, is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah.
Just because it is not what I expected from a Scorsese film.
Yeah.
It's kind of something different. Dramedy, like drama comedy. And I think that there were some elements in it that were in Raging Bull that we complained about. Kind of these elements of like domestic abuse and like what that does to a person, a family. And I think they were handled with a lot more care for the lead character in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. I would say Mean Streets is a close second. I loved Mean Streets.
Mean Streets was a very good movie. Man. That is my number one, as I just said, obviously, but I really like that movie.
Yeah. Those movies, honestly, I think either one of them could be my favorite on any given day so far. Taxi Driver, the only reason Taxi Driver comes in third, and this eventually may be a reason that it would eclipse these movies for me, is that it is a film that when it was over, I wasn't immediately like, wow, I loved that. It is a movie that is
it
kind
didn't
of
really
punishing.
sit well with you at first. You were kind of we were talking about it. You weren't feeling good there about it. That was actually my second time, so I felt even better.
Yeah, I like the movie. As the further away we get from it, the more I really like the movie. But it is not the kind of film that they make anymore, where you leave the audience feeling
you're in two separate worlds when that movie ends.
Yep. It is punishing on purpose. Like, it is a brutal movie. The anti-hero kind of thing where you are forced to have some sympathy for Travis, despite what he does and who he becomes is really like confronting, like, to the viewer. I mean, you have to kind of dig through yourself for a while and figure out how you feel about that. But that's something I haven't experienced in a long time, and it's growing on me, Yeah,
and it'll be nice too. I mean, I know that we're starting out with Scanners, and episode 2 will be a Scorsese film, episode 3 will be a Cronenberg film, so on and so forth, and then we'll pick 2 new directors when this one's done, and it'll just continue on with the series. But we also will talk in another episode in the future about some of these films that we didn't do a whole episode about, because there's definitely a lot to talk about, at least for Mean Streets and Taxi Driver. I'd love to sit down for 45 an hour and just talk about those 2 films, and kind of as like a bonus episode, whether that'll be on our website or it'll be on Patreon only exclusive. But we definitely will be doing a bonus episode where we talk about these movies that we did not actually do an episode for.
Maybe what we'll do is, even as we reach the end of these directors' filmographies, before we pick 2 more, because I foresee this being an ongoing thing, maybe we will circle back to the beginning of each of their filmographies and watch the first 2 films or 3 films.
I would love to listen to a Cronenberg discography, though, man. I'm sure he got some sick tracks out there right now. I'm gonna have to say, I know this is a cop-out right now, and I don't want to be this guy, but I think Scanners is going to have to sit at my top spot right now. I'd love to be that guy and sit here and be like Shivers and Rabid, some of the first 2 movies, and kind of just be like a real, true movie buff. Right. But Scanners really did it for me, man, and it really did it. So Scanners, then probably Shivers. I really enjoyed that as my first taste The Brood, then Rabid.
Okay. And what
Which
about
that-
Fast Company?
Oh, I totally forgot about Fast Company. Fast Company would actually be number 2.
I would say The Brood is my favorite. I would say it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Then I would say
Wow, we
Shivers,
really have some contrast on this one.
which is
It's like-
fun. I
It's
like that.
Flopped.
Shit. I would say Shivers next because that was my first time seeing that movie, and for his first film that we watched, I thought it was really well done and scary, and I ended up buying a Blu-ray after we watched it. Then surprisingly, I would also say Fast Company because similar to Alice Doesn't Live Here
Ooh, I love
Anymore,
that
it is
movie,
like
man. Such a feel-good movie.
right. It is not at all what you would expect from a Cronenberg movie, but it is just like there's something about watching movies where the characters are like regular beer drinking people
Mhm.
that makes you just like want to grab a couple beers and sit down and watch this movie.
It did
And
too.
really
I wasn't
is-
even planning on drinking when I was watching that. I was like, I have to go get a couple beers.
There's like
What
a
it was, it
scene
just
with
made
these
me feel like I had to.
there's a scene with these race car drivers in a bar and they're all having a frosty mug. That I would say Scanners, which I love, but I do think is a little bit slower than I remembered. But I do love. And then last, I would say Rabid, and I think you and I are both on the same boat on this one, which I didn't think it was a bad film, but I thought that it was pretty easily. I thought the weakest so far. A little, not even slow, but it was just kind of like not a lot happened. You kind of watch this person who has this thing under her armpit and she's going around killing people, and it's almost like a slasher in that sense. Like you kind of just follow her around. There's not a whole lot of extra stuff to think about.
Yeah, I felt
It was
like it was
fine.
just like you were just trying to redo the first one at that point.
It did feel very similar. It felt like a watered down version of Shivers to me.
Yeah, it felt like he was still in his kind of in his own like element, working to what he can, and just kind of made almost the same movie.
It's interesting to me because that is a challenge that you and I might, will hopefully someday see.
It's a challenge we're facing right now, man. I mean, not one day scene. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
of two. I mean,
having scripts in progress and trying to hone in on what you're good at, and figure out what your strengths are and what your aesthetic is and what your hallmarks are without repeating yourself.
Yeah. 100%. I think it's going to be key to take a lot away from this as we move forward throughout Lomo Media's life and our time doing this. And really just kind of be critical of ourselves and understand the same thing, that we're talking about.
I agree. I'm looking forward to incorporating that aspect of this into this series as we go forward too, is
I am
letting
too.
people know kind of what we're working on and how it's being influenced and informed by the things that we're watching.
Yeah, and I think the key is, if for some reason you ended up watching this one first before our Lomo show over on our main YouTube channel, I think it's key to check out that first episode. I mean, we talk a lot about, us starting out, where we're at, and kind of how we're going. So if you haven't checked that out, go to our main YouTube channel and kind of watch that so you can get more in depth of kind of what we're dealing with right now.
A lot of legs here. There's a lot of wheels turning at Lomo HQ, and so this is kind of just one lovely aspect of what we do that I am fortunate to have right now, especially during the pandemic and everything, is to be able to sit down with my friend and my work partner and to be able to just watch movies and feel like I am at the movies with someone.
It's great,
and
man.
learning.
It doesn't really feel like work because we love doing it, so it's good. I really enjoy it. It's one of the things I look forward to every single week. That's just kind of that like carrot that is dangled. Like just get through the week and get the movies with the friend. It's good.
Talking about The King of Comedy next.
Yeah, next week.
So if you want to watch that before next week, Go ahead and watch that, and we would love to obviously hear. This is the first video, so I guess it goes without saying, but crazy. We would love to hear your opinions and your thoughts on Scanners in the comments, and your own Scorsese and Cronenberg rankings. Kind of,
Yeah, we
these are just
definitely
two directors that we kind of pulled out of the air, but
yeah, no, we definitely
tell us-
encourage it.
good. Thank you for tuning in and listening to us talk about Scanners, and I hope you enjoyed the first episode of At the Movies with Lo and Mo. And for both of us, I'm here to say, let the cake sit, baby.